everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I thought we would talk about something that would be hopefully useful for you going into the 2025 breeding season, and that is covering safety when pairing your Chahoua for the first time. They're a species that can have some volatility. You know, there can be fights that happen. They can even potentially kill each other. So it is an important topic, even if it's maybe a bit of a less fun one. But I thought I would give you some useful tips and tricks that we've used throughout the years to sort of minimize some of the potential bad things that could happen when we're pairing our animals. So without further ado, let's get into it. Just a quick caveat, you know, obviously these are animals, and although I can give you these tips and tricks, it's not going to be 100% foolproof. Things can still happen, so I just wanted to put that out there and get that out of the way. And now that we can actually dive into the details. Tip number 1, pairing both animals in a third neutral cage. And the reason that I recommend this is because Chahoua are territorial. And you have a male that is willing to defend his space and a female that is willing to defend her space. And if you take one and put it in the other's space, they're ready to defend against an invader instead of getting more into the mind of, oh, I'm meeting, a potential mate. So the way that we like to break them out of that is by taking them and pairing them into a completely unfamiliar space that is new to both of them, kind of puts them both on equal footing. They're both in more of an exploratory frame of mind. They're both kind of shaken and not in their element, and then they're not defending their turf. I know it can be a pain getting that third cage. It's extra space and extra money, but in my opinion, it's very, very much worth it. Tip number 2, swapping furniture. Take a piece of furniture from the male's cage and give it to the female's cage and vice versa. Usually we do this with cork bark, and we do it about a week before we actually pair the animals. And that way they can kind of get the smell of the other animal in their enclosure without actually having a confrontation with the living animal themselves. So it kind of prepares them for the idea that there might be a potential mate nearby. And then when they do come together, they have that smell, it's familiar. The animal that they're meeting for the first time isn't completely foreign to them. So it just kind of helps ease the transition in from solo bachelor, bachelorette living to being together for the first time. Tip number 3, decorate the cage, the neutral cage, with furniture from both the male and the female's cage. When you're ready to introduce the animals, if you combine all of their furniture together, it will give them some familiar hides and some familiar areas to go to if they're feeling stressed, but it will be both of their combined furniture together. They'll both have places that hopefully they feel familiar, and it gives them some comfort coming into that new space. Okay, everything's ready, and now it's actually time to introduce your animals, which brings us to tip number 4. Watch them. Constant vigilance. Seriously though, you probably do want to watch them for the next couple of hours. Just set some time aside, crack open a beverage, hang out, chill in front of the cage, and watch the geckos. Just make sure that nothing bad happens in that first couple of hours. It'll give you peace of mind because you have eyes on your animals, and you'll actually probably get to see some interesting behaviors, which I will talk about in a moment. So I thought I would go over some of the actually fairly normal behaviors that come with putting animals together and breeding attempts, which can look like fights. So, it can be scary when they're first approaching each other because you don't know if they're gonna fight or they're gonna, breed or whatever. So the first sign that things are about to happen is that the male will do a little dance. It's pretty silly, it's kind of adorable, but he does sort of a head bob, sort of a back and forth. This can also be accompanied by singing, but usually with Chahoua, I don't hear much in the way of singing like you do with crested geckos or especially leeches. Leeches are super vocal. Chahoua usually I don't hear much. It is something that they can do though. So if you hear them making some noise and you see him doing this little like, I'll show a video, I'll show a clip of it, then you know that he's actually approaching for that reason and not because he's attempting to attack her or anything like that. Another sign that it's breeding activity and not fighting activity is the male will attempt to bite the female around the neck area. So that is where, you know, a male will grab and hold on to the female. However, if he's inexperienced and, you know, if you're pairing them for the first time ever, they often are, and sometimes he can bite other areas and it can upset her and she can run away and it can be, you know, scary to watch. But so that's why you really need to keep a close eye, because you want to make sure that in his attempts, he's not injuring her. If they are locked, obviously that's mating. So congratulations, you've done it. They've actually mated and you'll possibly get fertile eggs. No guarantee, but it's a great sign if you actually see them locked together. It's no surprise that they're going to show signs of stress when they're initially paired. That's totally normal, and I'll go over some of those signs of stress. However, I would say if you're seeing those signs in like a week and they're still seeming really, really stressed, that might be a sign that they're incompatible. Some signs of stress can include the fact that they're both fired up all the time. Animals fire up and down. It means that they change color. So it's something normal that Chahoua do. If they're constantly dark, constantly fired up, that's a sign of stress. It can happen also when they're, you know, when you spray them or when it's cold or something like that. But if it's constant and they're always fired up, usually it's a sign that they're feeling a little bit stressed out. Another thing is if there's constant scrambling and running every time the pair run into each other. Maybe you hear one of them make a noise and it's just they're kind of seem always on edge, then that might be a sign that they're not compatible. Additionally, if you see overall mood or behavior changes in either of your animals over a long period of time, so let's say you have a female and she's normally really outgoing and, you know, she comes up to the front and she seems generally pretty chill and, you know, has a really sort of easygoing personality, and then after pairing, she's always hiding, she's always on the bottom, she's always just seeming bitey or upset. That can be a sign that she's generally just too stressed and that the male is constantly harassing her and she is not about it. If you see things like new nose rub on either animal, it could also mean that they are sort of cramming themselves into a corner or the top of the cage, and that is also a potential sign of stress. Not always, but it can be, especially if it's accompanied by the next thing, which is wounds. So if you see any sort of like injuries, like even small ones, if you find like blood in the cage, that sucks. On the flip side, there can be some really good signs that your pair is actually compatible and they've settled into a new routine. One of those signs is the female coming up and sitting near the male. Now, I know that people talk about crested geckos and that like, oh, they're cuddling and you know, people say like, oh, that's not cuddling, that's being, you know, that's bullying each other. And while that's true, it is a little bit different with Chahoua pairs. I've seen firsthand from many pairs that I have where they just like to be near each other, not even like taking up a specific hiding spot or anything, but the female will just come up and just kind of be next to the male. Sometimes they'll even twine the tips of their tails together. It's adorable. So, you know, although that can be true for New Caledonian geckos, that they can bully each other by like kind of laying on top of each other, I find that my Chahoua pairs that are well bonded and do really well do tend to seek each other out and, you know, live harmoniously in proximity to each other. Another good sign is if your animals occasionally fire down, especially if they're mostly fired down, you know, the majority of the time when there's nothing exciting happening or you're not misting them or something like that. You know, if they're chilling and they're fired down, it generally means that things have gone back to normal. Obviously, eating well and pooping are great signs that they are comfortable in their new home. If you change things up, sometimes they'll stop eating for a minute, but once they start eating, you know that they're starting to feel more comfortable. And for this part, I'm actually going to show you a live introduction that we did this week with a new pairing that we're putting together. They're going to be for that dark gecko project that I mentioned in the previous video, and you'll get to actually see how they interact with each other in the first, say, half an hour of meeting each other, and then I'm going to show some footage from a few days later, and you'll be able to see the difference. All right, they're both in. So now we wait and see if they like each other. Now he's spotted her because she panicked and ran over to this side. So we'll see what he does. Hopefully he's gentle. Look how he blends into that bark though. It's crazy. They can be any color and they just disappear on cork bark. Doesn't matter what. He's bobbing his head. That's sexy time dance right there. He tried something and she ran away. And that was her tail thumping because she's upset. He was just attempting to breed. He's definitely pursuing. As you can see from the footage, it didn't take long at all for the pair to seemingly accept each other. After 4 days, the female was out and about. She's fired down, as you can see in the footage. She's chill, and more chill than I've ever seen her, to be honest. They're both eating, they're both pooping, and they don't seem stressed out. They're not constantly hiding. I see them in different places in the cage, so far, so good. You know, we're hopeful that we get maybe some eggs this year. I'll definitely keep you updated on how the pair is doing and if they actually lay eggs for us, so cross your fingers. So for this next part, I'm going to give a content warning. We're going to talk about some animal injury. So Diamond is one of our females that we've produced. She's an amazing animal. Used to be fully white. And she has some green over her white, but she's still very beautiful and white. So this girl suffered a pretty major injury. She has obviously healed quite well. I'll go ahead and probably do an insert shot of her injury as well. Right around this area, the whole area was torn open by her mate. And this is a pair that had been together for, gosh, I want to say like 4 years at least. Like they'd been together for several seasons, never had a problem, coexisted completely fine. And then out of the blue one day, he just did that. And we still don't know why. Could have been an accident. It could have been, maybe they were going for the same cricket. Who knows? But we luckily found her in time. We got her antibiotics and treated with iodine. It is there, but she healed pretty magnificently. These guys can be pretty hardy animals, even if something like that happens. But the key is to catch it before there's an infection, because obviously reptiles across the board can be pretty susceptible to an infection. Especially if it becomes systemic, they can go downhill pretty quickly. So it's really key to catch things before they sit too long. So that's why At the beginning of the video, I talked so much about keeping an eye on your animals because I've witnessed this happen where you have a pair that has just been hanging out together, no problem, for years, and then one day, just something happens. And it doesn't necessarily even mean that they're incompatible, but like accidents happen. Hopefully you don't have a situation where you have an injured animal and you have to deal with it, but if you're breeding, it will likely come up at some point. So I just wanted to talk about it. I just wanted to talk about the reality of pairing animals because it's part of it. You know, if you're gonna be doing this, then you might want to know the bad parts as well as the good parts. And the good parts are great, but you have to be kind of mentally ready for those emergencies and have things ready to go just in case something goes wrong. I hope that this video gave you more confidence about pairing your animals. I know that it can be scary, and some of the stuff that I talked about is probably a little nerve-wracking, but that's part of being a breeder. If something happens, you'll be prepared and you'll be doing the best that you can, and that's all any of us can do. Do you have any additional tips and tricks to share? Put them down in the comments below. It may actually help somebody. And did these steps help you? If so, I'd love to hear about it. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more videos from me, and hit the notification bell to get notified every time I upload a new video. Best of luck out there and have a fantastic day. I will see you in the next one. Like and subscribe if you want to see more like this, and hit the notification bell to get uploaded. Do you want to get uploaded? You want to get uploaded? Yeah, good girl. Safety when pairing your Chahoua. I said Chahoua. I said Chahoua. Dang it.